everyone. Welcome to another in a series of Waterside Chats. My name is Ian Robertson. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. Thank you for taking the time. Today is kind of funny because I'm interviewing my boss, but today our guest is Christine Willow, who's the chair of the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. And some of the things that Christine and I are going to talk about today is a little bit about what are the priorities in her mind for the board as we navigate these challenging times? Talk about our response to COVID. What are the recovery plans for 2022? A little bit about our long-term planning. We've got a strategy session coming up with the board, and then talk about our sustainability and environmental initiatives. But before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen peoples, and specifically the honor and the privilege that it is for us to steward the lands alongside the Esquimalt Nation and the Songhees Nation. Very honored to have them on our board, and they've been part of our board since inception back in 2002. Not much has changed since the last time we had one of these Watersides chats. It's just that we continue to, as an organization, work in, if I can use a nautical term, some uncharted waters, as are all of you. But really an opportunity with Christine just to talk about, from her perspective and from the board's perspective, some of the key priorities and some of the challenges that we face moving forward. But before I begin, I thought it'd be great just to formally introduce Christine Willow as our board chair. Christine's been our chair since January, not new to the board. And maybe Christine, get you to introduce yourself and a little bit of background on who you are and your connections to GVHA.
Great, thank you very much, Ian, and welcome everyone who's joined. Appreciate you taking the time. As Ian said, I've been chair since just January. I became vice chair right smack dab in the middle of COVID-19. And I've been on the board for 4 years now. Previous to that, I owned my own company here in Greater Victoria. We had offices throughout BC, GT Hiring Solutions and Chemistry Consulting. With that company, we did a lot of work in tourism and hospitality, human resources. And prior to that, my background has been in the tourism hospitality industry. My first career was in the hotel industry. I spent many years working in hotels in Ontario, in the Caribbean, a short stint in Hawaii, and here in BC. So that's where my background and my passion for the industry comes. As far as professional activities and boards that I've been on, I've served on a number of community boards, such as the James Bay Community School Society. I was chair of that for 8 years. I've served as chair of the YYJ, Victoria Airport, been on the BC Restaurant Association board, chair of the Tourism Industry Association of BC. I've served on the board twice now for Tourism HR Canada, which is a national board specific around human resources endeavors for the tourism and hospitality industry. I'm sure there's more. I think I've served on way too many boards. And I've also served on the Victoria Police Board. So I think I've got a good understanding of the industry, as well as an understanding of our community and the challenges that our community faces. I'm not originally from Victoria, but I've lived here now for 30 years, and I've raised my children here. So very familiar with Victoria, very familiar with James Bay. I've lived here a couple of times now, lived here, moved away and come back. So I've seen the evolution of the harbour and everything at Ogden Point. I was also chair of Tourism Victoria for a while. And at that time, it was when GVHA was being formed. So have that history from the startup of the organization as well. So that's, in a nutshell, perhaps why I'm here today. And I'm actually representing one of our member agencies, which is the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Victoria.
Well, quite the background, Christine, and I think we're from a CEO perspective, we're very fortunate to have you with your experience and just an interesting piece that I don't think a lot of people would know is this is the second time you and I have done the chair CEO thing. When you were the chair at the Tourism Industry Association of BC, I was the CEO and had to come to you to tell you that I'm resigning from TIA BC to come to the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. So we're doing this all over again. So it's kind of a fun point. Just a reminder to everyone that as Christine and I can kind of continue a conversation and a dialogue, use the Q&A portion to ask any questions that you've got. And as we're talking, we'll try to make sure we get through all the questions for Christine. And so maybe, Christine, I'll just start off with a question that I've got here is, became our chair in late 2020 at the height of the pandemic and lots of uncertainty. Maybe what has helped ground you in terms of your decision-making and approach to the Harbour Authority as our new chair?
Well, first of all, I have to say that really solid groundwork has been laid. Dave Cowan, who was the previous chair for a number of years, just set a perfect example and really had that solid footing there. I think also the privilege of working with a really good management team makes it easy on any chair, whether that's myself or anybody else. So that's kind of the foundation, the footing that's there that helps me and makes me feel comfortable in being able to do this. And then we have a really super board, and there's a lot of people that come with different backgrounds, different perspectives that I can reach out to. They're not shy, so they'll hold me in check if they feel that I'm taking a different direction that perhaps isn't the right direction for the organization. So I feel comfortable with all those things there. Obviously, I would have wished it to be a different year to come in as chair, but we can't pick those things. And it also gives me the opportunity to see really how people come through in a crisis and to see what I would say is probably the best of the people. When everything is, excuse the pun, smooth sailing, then, you can, as a chair, you can do your thing, do the niceties, attend a few events, chair the board meeting, provide some input on strategic direction, but we're perhaps not as involved on the day-to-day as we are now. And that's not just me as chair, but the rest of the committee chairs and the board. So that, from my perspective, is a really positive, because I love to learn. Hopefully I've got something to share, but one of the reasons I've always given back or been on boards is because I think you need to support your community, and I can be a little bit opinionated and outspoken from time to time, and I always feel that if you're going to make some comments or have some criticism perhaps, that you should also then be willing to put in the work to provide some change or direction.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. And I'm just reflecting on your comments and my role as the CEO, and that, and I tell people this, that I'm very blessed to have a strong and supportive board, and I think it's really, like you said, it's easy to lead through the good times, but it's sort of through these challenging times that you really see the board and the management team and all the employees come together, and I can say that without a doubt. In the last year, I have felt the support of the board. I think there's a strong working relationship between board and staff at our board meetings, and so I feel very fortunate in the position that I'm supported by a strong team as well, as we do have a strong board. What do you see from a board perspective as being some of the top priorities for the kind of the next fiscal? Our current fiscal ends tomorrow, So we're starting a kind of a new page, but not really a new page, starting on Thursday. But what do you see as the top priorities for the coming year?
So I think we've had discussion as a board around this, and we've had discussion between you and I, Ian, certainly. And I think, first of all, because we're still in these difficult or uncertain times, particularly when it comes to any kind of planning and timelines, we don't know when borders will open again, etc. So it does make it challenging. And so from my perspective and my wish is to focus a little bit more. So maybe it's not 5 or 6 priorities that we're looking at, but really it comes down to 3 perhaps. And that's really what I think is key to sort of narrow down to that. The planning around safe resumption of cruise is obviously one. It's always difficult because cruise gets all the limelight, but there's a reason for that as well. It's highly visible. Everyone in the community sees it. You know, the business community sees the benefits of it. It's 70% of our revenue. So for all those reasons, yes, cruise is there, and the safe resumption is really important. But then there are the other things that I would call that are a little bit perhaps more behind the scenes that are just as important. So with safe resumption of cruise, we're looking at sustainability in our financial outlook for the next 12 months. We know that that's not going to be part of it, but we do have to plan for the return. There's work to be done to do it safely. That's mostly staff and management, but it's still part of the board input. The other is around our asset management. So we don't have the same revenue, yet we still have facilities that need care, that need maintenance, that need upkeep. And I'm going to knock on wood that, for the next 12 months, we don't have any major issues with any of our assets because they're very costly assets. And I'm talking about things like the breakwater, some of the marine retaining walls that we have within our properties, some of the docks that we look after. And on some of our docks, people live. So it's really critical that they're well maintained and safe. So it's the asset management, that's the other piece. And then the third one I would say is the not just diversification to look at different revenue streams, but optimization with those that we have or the properties that we have, and how do we make sure that we really use them to the best, both from a usage, activity, community perspective, as well as revenue enhancement. So those are probably the 3 that I'm hoping the board will agree when we do our strategic planning session are the focuses for the next 12 months.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that, we're not trying to bite off too many items, like to try and really keep it simple and get our focus on the main areas. And, you talk about our facilities and the fact the focus, yes, naturally, with 70% of our revenue, our focus has been on cruise, but you and I today just did a presentation to the chamber and informed the chamber that I use the expression that we look after and manage a town like Tassus. When I look at all of the people, the population of the people in our float homes and liveaboards that are on our properties, it's like the village of Tassus. And so that means we are responsible for running a 24/7, 365-day operation. And now that obviously we're now seeing a second season without cruise, our focus is now on those properties that we do see activity. For example, Fisherman's Wharf, and working on that to ensure that we give the operators full opportunity to generate as much revenue as they can in these difficult times, yet keeping the float home owners safe and trying to find that right balance, and along with our inner harbor marinas, and ensuring that with BC boaters, if they want to take their boat out, that we've got the marinas open and available. But along with that does come the challenge of ensuring that our assets are well taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a quick reminder, I'm talking to Christine Willow, our board chair, and that if you've got any questions, to use the Q&A function. And actually, as I said that, there is a question that came in. More of an operational question, but Christine, you and I talk this all the time. The question is, do you see the possibility of cruise ship resumptions this year? And I'll obviously let you comment on that, and then I can provide some additional context as well.
Okay. No, I don't. And partly also because our cruise season is very specific. We are not year-round under the best circumstances. And so looking at the current increase in wave, not just here, but across the world, where there's more concern again around the growth of the number of people who are affected by COVID-19, I think is just going to really limit things. Ian can certainly speak more towards what it actually takes to get things back up and running. So it's not something that can happen immediately. If we find out that, oh, happy day, fingers crossed, everyone has their vaccine by July 1st, and that we're doing well, we're starting opening up the borders. The cruise ships can't just say, okay, well, we'll come July 2nd then. And that's something to consider. So right now we have the instructions from Transport Canada around February next year. That's what we as an organization are working towards. And that would then allow us to have a season, with our season starting in early April for 2022. But for this year, I really don't see much chance of that for all the reasons that include health and just a general startup again once things get rolling.
Yeah, well said. I totally agree with you that I'd say the chances are almost nil, like they are nil, that we're not going to see any cruising this year. And I think one of the big factors is there's been lots of media attention around the Alaska Tourism Recovery Act and the efforts by two U.S. senators in Alaska to have a temporary waiver of the Passenger Vessel Services Act. And there's been some focus around that. But what doesn't get talked about is the fact that the CDC down in the U.S. has said there's a conditional sail order in place now till October 31st. And it's always been there. And I know the cruise lines are anxious for that to be moved up. And there was some speculation that they were talking about maybe allowing cruise in the U.S. to start July 1st. Just recently, last week, the CDC has come down pretty hard and said, no, it's going to be October 31st. So that pretty much kills the Alaska season, even if the waiver were to come into place. But the chances of that happening, the waiver happening, are very slim. And first, we have to look to the CDC and see where they're going with that. So, the short answer is, yeah.
And I think the other thing is, as a resident, take my board hat off. As a resident of Victoria, I know there are some cruise lines that are having ships go out again in Europe as well as in Asia, and great, they can practice. They can try out the new procedures and what works, what doesn't, and then when they come here, hopefully we are in a much better place of knowing what's safe and understanding what's needed. Not necessarily just us, because there are some things at Ogden Point that we would need to do, the cruise lines. And so, at the moment, it's not the right thing. And that's why I talk about the other things we need to focus on, which is our other assets and the optimization of those other assets as well.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Another question, just for you. Our strategic plan goes from current strategic plan goes from 2015 to 2025. You and I have been talking about the fact that 2025 seems a ways away, but it's just around the corner from a planning perspective. Maybe you could talk a little bit long term, if you've got any personal thoughts around where you'd like to see the organization, GVHA, the working harbor, in the long term. And let's kind of say the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. It's a good question, and there's the wish list, and then what might be reality and doable. One of the things that I've talked about, and one of the things that I think is a good solid first step, is along with other partners in all the areas along the harbor who manage other assets and properties. I think looking at a more cohesive one harbor approach, which means that right now GVHA looks after Fisherman's Wharf, then nothing, then Steamship Terminal, then the Causeway, then nothing, then shares ship points with somebody else, and then oops, it's a city parking lot, and then oops, we're back again. So there's all these bits and pieces of our properties that aren't cohesive. And I think in order to really maximize what everybody's called this jewel that we have, our harbor, if we could work towards having one organization, and in my view, the most appropriate is the GVHA, oversee the whole waterfront along the way, looking at sort of the inner harbor all the way to the bridge, the Blue Bridge, and perhaps just a little beyond. Then there's more opportunity from a development perspective. It probably is easier from a financial management perspective. When we do things up until the wall of the causeway, and then if you step 1 foot over, well, now it's the city of Victoria who looks after things. So even something as simple as basic maintenance, where's the efficiencies that we can find? So that's my view and hope that we could get there. When you think of some key cities around the world, their harbor is their jewel, and they tend to sell that and reflect that. And we do that too. I mean, our marketing has our harbor on there. And I don't mean GVHA marketing, I mean the destinations marketing. And really to be able to make the best use out of all of those under one umbrella is my vision and my goal. And maybe that's something that we can work towards in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, you and I have talked. I think that's a terrific vision. You and I have talked about the fact that we're just completing. GVHA has taken the leadership on the economic impact survey, and we've been partnering and collaborating with a lot of other harbor users. And I think not only are we going to be getting some really good data on the value of the working harbor, not just GVHA's assets, but the entire working harbor. And I think that gives us an opportunity to maybe springboard and have yet kind of a harbor visioning discussion around what we collectively want that entire harbor to look like and what GVHA's role is in that process. So simply said, but not easily done, is really the vision for how we can link all of the harbor assets together under a cohesive vision. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I think that this past year has really shown it's not just the tourists that love our marine waterfront and the harbor. Our community loves it. The usage has shown that, and people are using the waterfront for walks, for family get-togethers. Fisherman's Wharf has been probably busier than ever in some cases, and that's residents enjoying it. So making sure that we build things that suit the community, not necessarily for the tourists, but the tourists that enjoy it as well. A good example of how important some of the assets within the inner harbor are. Ian, as you know, we said we didn't have the finances to do the flowers on the Welcome to Victoria. Now, the Welcome to Victoria, you would think, is for the tourists, the boaters that come into our harbor. But the residents were disappointed that we weren't going to be doing the plans. And it was great that we had community partners, Czech and others in our landscaping company that stepped up. So I think sometimes we assume we're doing all of this for our tourists, whether they come in on a personal marine craft boat, on a ferry, on a cruise ship, or otherwise walking through the harbor. No, it's actually for our community and our community members that enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's right. Thanks to Czech and Horizon Landscaping for stepping in and helping us with that. That's a $50,000 number, and I think when we talk about that, we haven't really talked about the number, but people think, oh, it's a few flowers. Well, no, it's a lot of flowers, and a lot of labor. And when we were going through the very difficult decisions around what we had to cut, because we did eliminate just over 50% of our operational expenses, that was one that we had to look at and go, that's something we just couldn't afford to do. So you're right. We heard loud and clear from the residents. They had a lot of creative ideas and a lot of solutions to try and to bring that back. And again, thanks to Czech and Horizon for doing that. I've got a question here. And okay, so this is good because this will kind of, you have to put your Tourism Victoria, now called Destination Greater Victoria, kind of put your TVIT chair hat back on. And the question is, how does GVHA view yachting events like the Vic Maui International Yacht Race as an asset in the rebuilding of Victoria tourism and showcasing the causeway, promenade, and marina?
So, yeah, good question. I think there's a huge value to all those kind of activities in the harbor. One of the other boards I was involved with was the what was it called now? The Greater Victoria, wasn't the Marine Festival, Harbor Festival, that we had years ago. And when I first arrived in Victoria, my first week of living here, when I moved here, I stayed at the Empress and overlooked the harbor, and it was in April. And it was Swiftshore coming up and all the boats. And I thought, man, what a fantastic place I've landed in. So I think all those kind of activities are a benefit from a tourism perspective. Those people talk about Victoria when they go back. I think it's a fantastic way to market word of mouth. I think residents enjoy the activity. So whether it's Swiftshore or Victoria to Maui or any of the activities that we've had, the festivals that we've had in the past down on our properties, even Jazz Fest and some of the other activities that we do at Ships Point, the markets, those are all really beneficial. And so I think, my hope is they all come back and that we all make it through this tunnel and be able to have them here again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. From an operational perspective, from my perspective, they are so integral to what makes Victoria unique. We always have to find that balance, though, because the commercial operators quite often are asked to be displaced as we bring in these larger events. So it's always a bit of a dance, and I can say most of the time, a lot of the time, the commercial operators understand the benefit that brings, and we get tremendous support on our properties. When we don't have COVID and we're able to operate at a full budget, we host over 50 different events on our properties throughout the year, and we have a position of a full-time events coordinator because it does take a lot of coordination. Unfortunately, we've had to temporarily eliminate that position due to COVID. And I'm hoping when COVID is over and we begin to see crews return, that we'll be able to support these events in the way that we have in the past.
And maybe, Ian, we need to be more, we need to look at creative in different ways because first and foremost, it's a working harbor. We have commercial vessels, leisure vessels, we have float planes in our harbor. That all needs to be considered when we talk about the festivals. But I think, if everyone works together, and it also goes back to that cohesiveness of the whole harbor, all the properties, then yeah, these kind of events can still take place. But it does take work and it takes effort, and it certainly can't be done to the detriment of what I call the working harbor, those that are regularly there.
Okay, good point. Bit of a fun question. I think I know the answer to this, but what's your favorite spot on our properties? Where do you like to go?
Two. So as I mentioned, I live in James Bay. I live about 2 blocks away from the breakwater in Ogden Point. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson, and Ogden Point is his favorite playground. Whether it's taking his bicycle, Grandma bought him a Jeep. Oma and myself bought him a Jeep, one of those remote control ones, and we take it down there and ride along Ogden Point. Love it there. I've been walking the breakwater since I've moved here the last 30 years, every Sunday with a friend. And then I love Fisherman's Wharf. I love being able to pick up a snack, go back, sit on the grass or sit along the dock, depending on the day, and enjoying that. And that's just great. I use the causeway all the time when I walk into town. I don't walk at the top, I go down at the bottom. I love seeing the artisans there. I actually have a couple of pieces of art hanging in my house that, spontaneously kind of go, oh, love that. So it's a little hard to say, but I would say, there's the Ogden Point, including the breakwater. And by the way, I look forward to the barge coming back. Fisherman's Wharf and going for a bite there. Love going to Finest at Sea and picking something up and either having it there or bringing it back for dinner and enjoying our causeway.
Okay, good. Well, you gave me a little bit of a hint there. I'm making a note. Make sure we have a plan to bring back the barge. So
yeah.
we'll add that. We'll add that to the work plan when COVID is over. Yeah. Just kind of continuing on with some of our questions. Let's talk sustainability. Obviously, there's the financial sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability. What do you see as maybe the biggest challenge for us as an organization, and opportunity, I guess, maybe challenge and opportunity for GVHA along the lines of sustainability?
So that's a good question, and it's a tough question, because as I mentioned earlier, really it's when I look at the financial side of it to begin with, it's ensuring that we keep the talent that we have, that we can maintain the properties that we have, while looking at new opportunities, working with our member agencies and our partners to look at how can we best optimize the assets that we have. What can we do beyond what we already do? And sometimes, it takes a crisis to sort of spur us into that kind of thinking. And us, I mean, the community as a whole, as to, what we can best do. So the financial sustainability obviously is critical. We're fortunate that we've had some good years. And because of that, we are able to keep things going, keep the lights on right now. But that's not going to last forever. So we really need to look at that. I think when it comes to sustainability, the other thing that a lot of times people don't understand, because we're called a harbor authority, but we're not the same as some other port authorities around Canada, we receive no funding. Not on a municipal level, not on a provincial level, not on a federal level. We are completely self-sustaining, and that makes it a challenge. So we're no different than many of the business operators that are out there that are trying to find new ways to be sustainable, and I think we need to look at doing that as well. I think the way our world is right now, we may finish with this crisis, but we don't know in 3 years what other crisis comes along or what other challenge. And so making sure that we're in a solid position when that happens is important. our environment is critical, and so the sustainability around that, and sustaining with our partners. That's the other one to me that I think is important, because I think we're always better when we work together than when we work against each other. And that's on all perspectives. And we will benefit financially when we don't tear each other down. So that's my hope and goal. It's going to be tough because even when cruise does come back, we don't know to what extent. Yes, you can see right now with the travel in the US that there's pent up demand for some travel. But the cruise ships have also had it extremely difficult with huge assets to maintain and no revenue. So to what capacity are they coming back? Is it a doors open and we're similar to what we were before, or is it a gradual rebuild? In all honesty, and we can't really say that at this point. So we need to do a little bit of a longer term planning around our financial picture. And I think keeping that in mind as we work on our strategic plan and our future is really critical and important.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point just now and earlier that as we see cruise restart in other areas, just last week, Royal Caribbean announced that they were going to begin cruises out of the Bahamas. So there's airlift and hotel support in Bahamas. So they're going to be doing, I think, 7-day itinerary out of the Bahamas, going to their private island called Coco Cay. And I think that'll give us an opportunity to see, well, are they booking at 40% capacity, 50% capacity? And like you made the point earlier, and I'm actually really glad that we're going to see some of these lines kind of test itineraries. It'll give us a bit of an understanding as to what we can project moving forward. You mentioned our connection with member agencies, and maybe just to build on that a little more, is we're made up of our member agencies, our 8 member agencies, several stakeholders. We have over 107 commercial agreements that we have. How do you see our engagement with the member agencies, stakeholders, and the public changing or shifting as we kind of look forward to what post-COVID will look like?
Good question. So having been on the board for the last 4 years, even within the last 6 months, I've seen what I would say is a positive shift. I'll start with our member agencies first. Again, in good times, they're perhaps not as involved. They're busy with their own lives and businesses. And I'm happy to say that from my perspective, member agencies may view it differently. I would love to hear if they do. The relationship is actually getting stronger. The communications over the past 2 months that we've had, some of the presentations that you and I have made, Ian, I feel have been really positive. People have been engaged, asked questions, attended. Those are all really positive things. So I think we're strengthening things with our member agencies. Having said earlier, I can be honest and blunt at times. Quite frankly, there were some of our member agencies that were absent, that were there in name only. But not really in what I would call a true partner. And that's improving. That's getting better. And to me, that's a positive outcome of this crisis. So, that engagement, and that goes both ways. I think, we need to make sure that we also are there for them, and that we ask the right questions at the right time, or check in with them when they may need us. It can't be one way. But at least if the dialogue's there and the door's open and we can have the conversations, then we'll eventually get there. And as I've said, I've seen an improvement. I think we still have a bit of a ways to go with some of our community members, where there's the confusion around what we do, what we don't do, how we're funded, why we do some of the things that we do, and the benefits to the community. the activities that GVHA does. So I think we can improve on some of that, and I look forward to having discussions not only with those that support us, but also with those that perhaps are either sitting on the fence or have alternate views about GVHA and the things we do. So I put that out there, and I welcome the conversation. Doesn't mean we have to agree all the time, but I certainly welcome the conversation. And then I think our business partners are our other stakeholders. And that's anything from the retail operator that might run the gift shop, whether that's at Ogden Point or in town, our marine partners that run some of either the tour activities, whale watching, the harbor ferries. We need to work with all of them, and I think from what I've seen, we are doing that. We've tried really hard during this pandemic not to forget them and just look at self-preservation for GVHA. We looked at deferring rent. We looked at making sure that we apply for all the kind of government funding that there is so we can pass it on to our partners and stakeholders. Those are the things that I think are key, and that GVHA does and does well. And I know, Ian, it's close to your heart to work that way. We just need to make sure that we continue to do that, and that people know that our doors are open for comments and questions, and we're happy to engage.
Yeah, no, well said. I think for those that are participating, Christine referred to our member agencies. Those are really if I can say this, the founding fathers or the founding organizations of the GVHA, and a list of those member agencies is on our website. And it's really the member agencies where we draw upon our board of directors. And as you mentioned, you are the member agency director representative from the Chamber of Commerce. So there's more information there. We're kind of getting into the wrap-up mode, so I would encourage, if you've got any last questions for Christine or for me, to make use of the Q&A. And Christine, so we do have another question.
Okay.
Can you talk about the new Coast Initiative? The Coast Initiative is the SIP plan for the Ocean Hub and the city's plan for an ocean supercluster. Can you talk about that? And, while GVHA is watching it from the sidelines, is there an opportunity do you see for us to be involved, and how do you think that could look?
Well, yes, when it comes to being involved in some capacity. I think, if it has to do with anything in a harbor or marine activity, GVHA should be at the table. And it's not necessarily that we need to lead any of these kind of things, but to provide expertise, background, input is valuable. SIP is relatively new in the sense that SIP came after GVHA was formed. So, there's an opportunity with an organization to work closer. They're not an official member agency with us, but to ensure that we work close together, because there's opportunity and overlap on any kind of project, whether it's the Coast Project or any other project that comes up. So I think there's probably some work that can be done towards that, to no fault of GVHA or SIP. I think it's just as we identify opportunities to work together on marine-related projects, activities, initiatives.
Again, well said. I think from my perspective, it's the fact that we have a deep water terminal, and there's opportunities that I think we can talk about, and to link in our deep water terminal. So I think more conversations need to occur, should occur, as we see that project and that initiative unfold. Kind of another question coming in is, what work is planned with First Nations this year?
Good question.
Yeah.
So first of all, I would like to acknowledge through this crisis what a great partner they are. And that is both the Esquimalt Nation and the Songhees Nation. They are on our board, and we have a First Nation Economic Development Committee as well. And part of our mandate and our governance is that we provide funding for economic development through our FNET committee to the First Nations, and that's part of it's a percentage formula off our revenue. And because we have been all tightening our belt, reduced our costs, it was volunteered and offered by our First Nation partners to suspend that for this coming year, which I think is hugely generous and really shows a true partnership. So that's been amazing. That doesn't mean that we've stopped any activities and initiatives. We are working on PAR, and Ian, you're going to have to correct me. It's the
Progressive Aboriginal Relationship.
Progressive is the first word, Aboriginal relationship. And it's a criteria that we are being evaluated against, where you can get a certification on your initiatives and your relationships and what you are doing with your First Nations partners as a business. And we are just in the process of going through that. We have made a presentation to Esquimalt Nation. We're going to be doing one to Songhees Nation around where we're at with that and their support. And it includes everything from our hiring and recruitment practices to ensure that we are inclusive, that we provide opportunities, training opportunities. It means looking at First Nation businesses when we go out and source for things that we need as an operation. So there's lots of other things that I think we are doing and can continue to do during this downtime. And then, of course, ramping back up once we as an organization are running at full tilt again.
Okay, fantastic. I'm seeing another question being typed. Okay, there's currently no other open questions. So maybe we'll just end on one last question, Christine. And that is, what inspires you?
People. And I know that's a simple answer, but it's those that I work with, those that I work for, the team that we have as a board. There's a number of people around that table that truly inspire me. They're marvelous. People like our management team who keep working through, positive, engaging, not giving up through difficult times. When I had my own business, it was my team that inspired me. I always said that I can do a whole lot of things, but I'm not an expert at any of them. And I always knew when to step back and ensured that those that were the experts were allowed to shine through it. And my family. Being a grandma or an oma is fantastic. When you've got a little 2.5-year-old telling you, how the world goes, or you need to do this, or watch out for that. Seeing young people and the youth and what's coming up. Seeing the younger workforce. So it comes down to people. That's really what inspires me. It's probably what I find most difficult right now, because for me, in order to thrive, I like being around people. I'm a hugger. I love engaging with people, and this is hard. I like to be able to look people in the eye. I like to be able to engage with them. So yeah, that's what inspires me.
I couldn't think of a better way to end our conversation. So Christine, thank you. And just for, again, those of you, I see it's come up in the in the chat. If you've got any other questions for me or for Christine, please feel free to reach out to us at any time at gvha@gvha.ca. Christine, thank you.
Thank you.
Really great to hear your perspective on the organization and where you see us going in the future. So again, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you taking the time. And
yes,
we'll see you again. Thanks, Christine.
Thanks very much. Bye.